Session guitarist wouldn't let Chuck Berry touch $10K guitar. Too advanced for casual players. What happened in the next 3 minutes became the most legendary guitar store moment in music history, and proved that assumptions about people can lead to the most embarrassing lessons you'll ever receive. It was a Saturday afternoon in March 1985, at Sam Ash Music Store on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. Chuck Berry, now 58 years old but still touring regularly, was doing something he'd done for decades: browsing guitar stores. Despite being famous, Chuck loved looking at new gear, testing equipment, and staying current with what was available. He usually went unrecognized, just another middle-aged black man in casual clothes shopping for guitars. Today, Chuck was wearing a simple brown leather jacket, dark slacks, and a modest fedora. No flashy stage clothes, no publicity shots would suggest the father of rock and roll. To most people, he just looked like another older gentleman with an interest in guitars. Chuck was examining the premium guitar section, looking at high-end Gibsons and Fenders, when he noticed a crowd gathering around the custom shop display. A young man in his early 30s, expensive designer clothes, perfectly styled blonde hair, and the confident demeanor of someone who'd never been told he wasn't the most talented person in the room, was demonstrating guitars for potential customers. The demonstrator was technically proficient, running through blues licks and rock progressions with the kind of flashy precision that impressed casual observers. His name tag read Brad, and he was clearly working for the store that day. A hired session guitarist brought in to help sell expensive instruments on weekends. Brad was currently playing a gorgeous 1959 Gibson Les Paul reissue, a custom shop model with premium humbuckers and flamed maple top. He was running through scales, playing some blues rock fusion licks, showing what the guitar could do with theatrical flair. "This is the Gibson Custom Shop 59 Les Paul," Brad announced to the small crowd with the authority of someone who believed his own expertise was unquestionable. Hand-selected woods, historic pickups, nitrocellulose finish, vintage specifications throughout. This is a $12,000 instrument. When you play something at this level, you can immediately feel the difference from production line guitars. It responds to professional technique in ways that cheaper instruments simply can't match. Chuck watched with quiet interest. The guitar did sound good, and Brad was clearly a competent player, though his approach was somewhat mechanical. Lots of technical flash, but missing the soul that made music memorable. Still, he knew his scales and could demonstrate the instrument's capabilities effectively. Brad noticed Chuck standing at the edge of the crowd, looking intently at the Les Paul with the focused attention of someone who understood guitars. "You interested in this one?" Brad called out, assuming Chuck was just another customer drawn by the demonstration. "It's beautiful," Chuck said simply. "Great tone quality. It should be for 12 grand, Brad replied with a laugh that was meant to sound casual, but carried an undertone of superiority. "This is a professional instrument, not something for weekend warriors, but if you know what you're doing, if you understand high-end guitars, it's absolutely incredible." He played another impressive run up the fretboard, ending with a sustained bend that made the Les Paul sing. The crowd murmured appreciatively. "Can I try it when you're done?" Chuck asked politely. Brad looked at Chuck for the first time with real attention. He saw a conservatively dressed older black man, probably in his late 50s, wearing modest clothes that suggested middle-class means rather than rock star wealth. Definitely not the typical customer for a $12,000 guitar. Brad's expression shifted to what he probably thought was friendly professionalism, but was actually condescending tolerance. "Well, I suppose that would be okay," Brad said slowly, "but I should probably warn you, this guitar is pretty advanced. It's not set up like a typical production guitar you might find at a pawn shop or music store clearance rack. The action is perfectly calibrated, the pickups are extremely sensitive, and it responds very precisely to professional playing technique. It takes experienced hands to really understand what an instrument at this level can do." "I understand," Chuck said mildly. "And please be very careful with it," Brad continued. his tone becoming more explicitly condescending. "This is a $12,000 instrument, and I'm personally responsible for anything that happens to it while it's in customer hands. So no aggressive playing, no trying to recreate heavy metal solos you might have heard on the radio, no wild bending or aggressive techniques. Just gentle chord work, maybe some simple lead lines. Think of it as a museum piece that happens to be playable." Chuck smiled quietly. "I'll be gentle. I'm serious about this," Brad pressed, apparently mistaking Chuck's polite demeanor for inexperience. "This isn't a guitar for casual players or hobbyists. The setup is extremely sensitive, and the electronics are calibrated for professional use. If you're not used to high-end instruments, it might feel strange or respond differently than what you're expecting." "I appreciate the warning," Chuck replied. Brad finished his demonstration with a flourish, a fast blues rock run ending in a dramatic bent note held with vibrato. The crowd applauded politely. He carefully removed the strap and held the guitar out toward Chuck with obvious reluctance. "Here you go. Take your time. But remember what I said, easy does it. This is a delicate professional-grade instrument that requires respectful handling." Chuck took the guitar, adjusted the strap to his preferred height, and quickly checked the tuning. It was perfect. Brad was at least professional enough to keep it properly maintained. The crowd had started to disperse, but several people lingered to see what the next person would play. Brad stood nearby with his arms crossed, watching Chuck with the wary expression of someone protecting an expensive item from potential damage. Chuck strummed a few chords quietly, getting a feel for the instrument. The action was indeed very low and responsive. The pickups were sensitive and well-balanced. It was undeniably a fine guitar. Then Chuck Berry started to play. He began with the opening lick from Johnny B. Goode, that iconic double-string bend and rapid-fire single notes that had defined rock and roll guitar in 1958. His right hand moved with effortless precision, alternating between single notes and chord work, while his left hand executed those distinctive Chuck Berry bends and runs that every guitarist in the world had tried to copy for the past 30 years. Brad's expression changed from wariness to confusion to complete shock in about 3 seconds. His mouth literally fell open. The few people who'd been walking away stopped mid-step and turned around. Someone in the crowd gasped audibly. A teenager who'd been testing a bass amp put down his instrument and rushed over to see what was happening. More people started gathering from other parts of the store, the drum section, the keyboard area, even customers from the checkout line. Word was spreading through the store like wildfire. Something incredible was happening in the guitar section. Chuck kept playing, moving seamlessly from Johnny B. Goode into Rollover Beethoven, his fingers dancing across the fretboard with the casual precision of someone who'd played these patterns literally thousands of times. Because he'd written them. The intricate double stops, the perfectly timed bends, the rhythmic precision that made simple chord progressions sound revolutionary. It was all there, played with an ease that made Brad's earlier demonstration look like a student recital. Someone in the growing crowd said loudly, "Oh my God, that's Chuck Berry." Another person responded, "No way. That can't be." But as Chuck transitioned into the solo from Sweet Little 16, playing those deceptively simple but absolutely perfect phrases that had influenced every rock guitarist who came after him, there was no doubt about who was holding that Les Paul. Brad's face went from white to red to a shade approaching purple. He looked at the person who'd identified Chuck, then at Chuck, then back at the crowd, as if seeking confirmation that this couldn't possibly be real. Chuck moved effortlessly into improvised runs that showcased the guitar's capabilities far better than Brad's careful demonstration had. The Les Paul was singing under his hands, bends that spoke with emotional clarity, single notes that cut through the air with perfect articulation, rhythm work that made the guitar sound like it was breathing and talking. These weren't just technical exercises. This was music that told stories, that made people feel something, that demonstrated the difference between knowing how to play guitar and understanding how to make a guitar sing. The crowd had grown to maybe 50 people now, forming a semicircle around Chuck, phones held high, recording this impossible moment. Store employees had abandoned their stations and were watching with expressions of stunned recognition. The store manager had emerged from the back office and was simultaneously thrilled and panicking about protocol for when actual rock and roll legends casually showed up in his store. A young guitarist in the crowd was literally shaking with excitement. An older man was shaking his head in disbelief, muttering, "I can't believe this," over and over. Several people were calling friends, trying to explain what they were witnessing. Brad stood frozen, still holding his arms crossed defensively, but now he looked like a statue that had forgotten how to move or breathe. Chuck played for maybe 4 minutes total, seamlessly weaving together pieces of his greatest hits with improvised passages that showed both the guitar's capabilities and his own undiminished mastery. He ended with a final bend from Memphis, Tennessee, letting the note ring out with perfect sustain. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. People were shouting "Chuck Berry" and "Oh my God," and "I can't believe what I just saw." Chuck carefully removed the strap and held the guitar out to Brad, who looked like he might faint. "You're absolutely right," Chuck said pleasantly. "It's a responsive instrument. The pickup balance is excellent, and the sustain is very good. Fine craftsmanship." Brad took the guitar with trembling hands, staring at Chuck as if he'd just witnessed a miracle. You're Chuck Berry," Brad managed to say. "I am. I just told Chuck Berry that a guitar was too advanced for casual players," Brad said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I told the father of rock and roll to be gentle because it was a professional instrument. I told you not to play heavy metal because you might damage it." The crowd was loving this. Still recording, some people laughing with delight at the absolute absurdity of the situation. Chuck shrugged, good-naturedly. "You were doing your job. You didn't know who I was. You were protecting an expensive instrument from a customer you didn't recognize. That shows responsibility." "But I was so condescending," Brad said, looking like he wanted to disappear. "I said it required experienced hands. To you, Chuck Berry, the man who invented rock and roll guitar playing." "Well," Chuck said with a slight smile, "to be fair, I am a casual player. I just casually stopped by to look at guitars, and you weren't wrong about the instrument being responsive. It really is well made." "I demonstrated a Les Paul to Chuck Berry," Brad said, still processing the situation. "You literally created half the techniques I was trying to show off. Every rock guitarist learned to play by copying your records." The store manager had pushed through the crowd and reached Chuck. "Mr. Berry, this is an incredible honor. Can we offer you anything? Would you like to try other guitars? Can we get you coffee? Or—" "I'm fine, thank you," Chuck said graciously. "I was just browsing." Brad here gave a very professional demonstration of that Les Paul. He knows his instruments. He turned back to Brad, who was still holding the $12,000 guitar like it might explode. "Can I give you some advice? Not about playing, you play well, but about demonstrating guitars." Brad, who looked like he'd been struck by lightning, nodded mutely. "When you demonstrate a guitar," Chuck said, "don't just show off techniques. Show the guitar's personality. Every instrument has its own voice, its own character. That Les Paul has a warm, thick tone with great sustain. Those are its strengths. Demonstrate those qualities, not just your ability to play fast runs." He gestured toward the guitar. "May I?" Brad practically threw the instrument back to him. Chuck played a simple melody, just a few notes, but each one was perfectly placed and bent with just the right amount of emotion. He showed how the guitar responded to different touch dynamics, demonstrated the tonal range with gentle volume swells. "See, that's what this guitar does well," Chuck explained to the captivated crowd. "It's warm, it sustains beautifully, and it has personality. It responds to emotion, not just technique. That's what sells a $12,000 instrument. Not speed, but character." He handed it back to Brad. "You're a good player with solid technique. But remember, when you're demonstrating an instrument, you're introducing people to what it can become in their hands. not auditioning for a recording contract. Brad nodded like he'd just received a master class from the Mount Rushmore of guitar playing, which he had. Thank you, Mr. Barry. And I am so sorry for the way I spoke to you. Don't apologize, Chuck said firmly. You didn't recognize me, and you were trying to protect an expensive guitar. Those are both good things. The only mistake you made was assuming that how someone dresses or looks determines how well they can play. But that's a lesson most people have to learn the hard way. Chuck started to leave, but the crowd wanted photos and autographs. He spent 20 minutes accommodating everyone, signing guitars, giving advice to young players, and being gracious about the entire situation. As Chuck was finally heading toward the exit, Brad approached him one more time. Mr. Barry, can I ask you something? Of course. When I told you the guitar was too advanced for casual players, did you know immediately that you were going to, well, show me up? Chuck laughed, a warm sound that filled the store. Show you up, Brad? I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I genuinely wanted to try the guitar. You gave me permission. I played it. That's all that happened. But you played Johnny B. good, Brad pointed out. You could have just strummed some chords and been done with it. Instead, you played one of the most famous guitar songs ever recorded. That had to be intentional. Chuck considered this with a slight grin. Well, maybe a little. But in my defense, you did tell me not to play heavy metal or radio songs. I played something I wrote 30 years ago. Technically, I followed your instructions exactly. Brad couldn't help but laugh, despite his embarrassment. That's actually a fair point. Brad, you're a good player, and you seem like a decent person, Chuck said. Don't beat yourself up about this. You're going to have a great story to tell for the rest of your life. That time I told Chuck Berry he couldn't handle a professional guitar. People will love that story. After Chuck left, Brad did indeed tell that story frequently. It became his signature anecdote, the story he'd tell at sessions and gigs for the rest of his career. I learned 3 things that day, Brad would say. First, never assume you know someone's ability based on how they look or dress. The older gentleman in the conservative clothes might be a living legend. Second, Chuck Berry could have destroyed me. He could have made me look like an amateur in front of 50 people. Instead, he was kind. He gave me advice. He turned a moment where I'd been completely condescending into a teaching opportunity. That's class. And third, there's a difference between knowing how to play guitar and understanding how to make music. Chuck Berry reminded me what that difference sounds like. The videos that people recorded of Chuck playing the Les Paul went viral, getting millions of views. The comments were full of people loving the story. The session guitarist's face when he realizes who he's talking to. Chuck Berry being told a guitar is too advanced for him, and the casual "I'll be gentle before playing Johnny B. good" is legendary. Sam Ash Music Store put up a small plaque near their custom shop section. On this spot, March 1985, Chuck Berry was told a guitar was too advanced for him. He was gentle with it. Years later, when Chuck Berry passed away in 2017, Brad posted a tribute that included the story and one of the videos from that day. In 1985, I condescended to Chuck Berry about guitar playing. He responded with grace, kindness, and a master class in both guitar and humanity. He could have humiliated me in front of 50 people. Instead, he taught me. He showed me the difference between technical ability and musical wisdom. That's who Chuck Berry was. A legend who never needed to act like one because his music spoke louder than his ego ever could. Rest in peace to the father of rock and roll, who proved that day that class and talent aren't mutually exclusive. They're what separate good players from immortal ones. The story became legendary in music circles, not just because of Chuck Berry's playing, but because of how he handled the situation. He turned what could have been a moment of public embarrassment into a lesson about respect, assumptions, and the difference between showing off and making music. It proved that true legends don't need to humiliate people to prove their greatness. Their artistry speaks for itself, and their character determines how they use their gifts to lift others up rather than tear them down. If this incredible story of mistaken assumptions and musical mastery moved you, Make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with anyone who needs to remember that you should never judge someone's abilities by their appearance. Have you ever been underestimated and gotten the chance to prove someone wrong? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the moments that proved what true class looks like.